Hello there everyone, welcome to Shadowman Stories. I am your storyteller and I'm here to guide you tonight. I know many of you use these videos to drift off to sleep, so before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. I'm always curious, where are you watching from and what time is it in your part of the world? Now, find your cozy spot and relax. My name is Marcus Whitehorse and I've been a ranger in the Olympic National Forest for 12 years. I've seen a lot of things out here that would make city folks nervous. Bears, mountain lions, hikers who got lost and never made it home. But what happened in October of 1962 was different. It was the kind of thing that makes you wonder if the old stories your grandfather told you might actually be true. I'm Cherokee, and my grandfather used to tell me stories about something called the Voice Stealer. He said it was an old spirit that lived in the deepest parts of the forest, and it would take people's voices and use them to trick others. I never believed him. I was a modern man with a good job and a family to take care of. My wife Elena and my twin daughters, Lucy and Marie, were everything to me. They were 8 years old that October, and they thought their daddy was the bravest man in the world. I'd been through the war in Korea, and I'd earned a Purple Heart for my trouble. Nothing in these woods could be scarier than what I'd seen. Over there, or so I thought. The Hoh River Valley was my territory. It's about 15 miles from the nearest road, and even then, you need a good 3 hours to get back up out there. The trees are giants, some of them 300 feet tall and covered in thick green moss that hangs down like curtains. There's always a mist hanging in the air, and the forest floor is so thick with fallen logs and ferns that you can barely see 5 feet in any direction. It was beautiful, but it was also isolated. When you're out there, you're really alone. The call came in on a Tuesday morning. 3 hikers from Portland had gone missing. They were experienced folks, members of a hiking club, and they knew what they were doing. The last radio contact we'd had was strange. The voice was shaky, scared. "Do you hear that whistling?" the man had said. It sounds like my wife calling my name." That should have been my first warning. I packed my gear and headed out with my partner, Jake Morrison. Jake was a good man, steady and reliable. He'd been a ranger for 8 years, and I trusted him with my life. We'd worked together on dozens of search and rescue operations, and we made a good team. The forest was quiet that morning, too quiet. Usually, you'd hear birds singing, squirrels chattering, insects buzzing. But as we got deeper into the valley, the sounds just stopped. Even Jake noticed it. "This place feels wrong," he said, adjusting his pack, "like something's watching us." I felt it too, but I didn't want to admit it. Rangers are supposed to be tough, practical. We don't get spooked by quiet forests. We set up our search pattern and started calling out the names of the missing hikers: James Morrison, Linda Chen, Susan Park. We'd shout their names and then listen for a response. But instead of hearing their voices, we started hearing something else. Whistling. It was perfect. Human whistling. Not the kind birds make, but the kind a person makes when they're walking down the street, happy and carefree. But it was coming from impossible places high up in the trees, far away in the distance, sometimes from what seemed like right behind us. When we turned around, there was never anyone there. "Jake," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You hearing that?" He nodded, his face pale. "That's not natural, Marcus. That's not natural at all." We tried our radio, but all we got was static, and then, through the static, we heard it. The whistling was coming through the radio too, on every frequency we tried. It was like whatever was making that sound was somehow broadcasting it. The temperature started dropping, not gradually, like it normally does in the mountains, but suddenly. In some spots, it was 15 degrees colder than others, and these cold spots formed perfect circles on the ground. The moss that usually swayed in the breeze hung perfectly still, like it was frozen in time. That's when we found the first body. James Morrison was 34 years old. He was standing upright, against a massive Douglas fir, his back straight, his eyes wide open. He looked like he was waiting for something, or someone. His throat was gone, not cut, not torn, gone. Like someone had taken a perfectly sharp knife and removed it with surgical precision. But there was no blood on the ground. No blood anywhere. It was like his blood had just disappeared. Jake threw up. I wanted to, but I forced myself to stay calm. I'd seen death before, but this was different. This was wrong in a way that made my skin crawl. "We need to call this in," Jake said, wiping his mouth. I tried the radio again, but now the static was mixed with something else. Voices, human voices, talking and laughing and calling out names, but they weren't real voices. They were too perfect, too clear. And one of them sounded exactly like James Morrison. "Jake," the voice said through the radio. "Jake, where are you? I need help." Jake's face went white. "That's James, but James is ... dead," I finished. "That's not James." But the voice kept calling, "Jake, please, I'm hurt. I need help. Please come find me." We looked at each other, and I saw the fear in Jake's eyes, the same fear I was feeling, because deep down, we both knew that whatever was making that sound wasn't human, and it was learning. We found Linda Chen 200 yards from James Morrison. She was positioned the same way, standing upright, back straight, eyes open, the same precise wound in her throat. But this time, there was something else. Her lips had been sewn shut with plant fibers, thin green strands that looked like they'd been pulled from the moss itself. As we stood there looking at her, we heard whistling coming from her direction, not from her body, but from somewhere behind her, deeper in the forest. The whistling was playing a tune I recognized. Mary, Mary, quite contrary. It was a children's song, innocent and sweet, but hearing it in that place made my stomach turn. "Linda," Jake called out, his voice shaking. "Linda, if you can hear us, we're here to help." I grabbed his arm. "Jake, stop, that's not Linda." But the whistling continued, and now we could hear a voice mixed in with it. A woman's voice, soft and pleading. "Help me," it said. "Please help me. I'm so scared." Jake started walking toward the sound. I had to grab him and pull him back. "It's not her," I said. "Whatever that is, it's not her." Our radio crackled to life again. This time, it was a voice I knew well, my own voice, calling out from the speaker. "Marcus," it said. "Marcus, over here I found something." Jake stared at me, then at the radio. "Marcus, how are you?" "I'm not," I said. "I'm right here." "That's not me." But the voice kept calling. "Marcus, please, you need to see this. It's important." I turned off the radio, but the voices didn't stop. They were coming from the forest itself now, from all directions. I heard my wife Elena calling my name, my daughters Lucy and Marie crying for their daddy. Jake heard his brother Tommy, who died in a car accident 3 years ago. "Tommy," Jake whispered, tears in his eyes. "Tommy, is that really you?" "Jake, don't," I said, but he was already walking away from me, following the sound of his dead brother's voice. I ran after him, but the forest seemed to shift around us. Paths that had been clear suddenly became blocked with fallen logs. Trees that I'd marked as landmarks were in different positions. My compass was spinning wildly, pointing in all directions at once. We were lost, and something was hunting us. The backup team arrived by helicopter 3 hours later. 3 men, led by Sergeant Rodriguez, a tough ex-Marine who'd seen action in Korea just like me. But as soon as they landed, I could see the fear in their eyes. "You hear that?" Rodriguez asked immediately. "That whistling. We all heard it. It was coming from everywhere and nowhere. A perfect human whistle that seemed to echo off the trees themselves." "My father," Rodriguez whispered. "That's my father's whistle. He used to whistle that tune when he worked in the garden, but he's been dead for 10 years. The team spread out to search for the 3rd missing hiker, Susan Park. I tried to stop them, tried to tell them to stay together, but they were already moving. The voices were calling to them, leading them deeper into the forest. Rodriguez disappeared first. We found him an hour later, positioned like the others, throat gone, eyes staring at nothing. But now his voice joined the chorus. Through the radio, through the trees, we could hear him calling out to us. "Marcus," Rodriguez's voice said. "Jake, you need to come help me. I'm trapped." Jake was falling apart. He kept trying to respond to his brother's voice, kept calling back to it. I had to watch him every second to make sure he didn't wander off. "It's not real," I kept telling him. "None of this is real." But deep down, I was starting to wonder if I was wrong, because the voices were too perfect, too exact. They knew things, personal things about us, about our families, about our past. How could something fake know so much? We found Susan Park in a hollow 15 feet up in a massive cedar tree. She was positioned to look down at the trail, like she was watching for someone. The same wound, the same empty stare. But this time, we could hear her voice calling out her children's names from the canopy above. "Michael," the voice called. "Sarah, Mummy's here. Come to Mummy." It was then that I saw it, a shadow moving between the trees. At first I thought it was just a trick of the light, but then I saw it again. It was tall, maybe 8 feet, and impossibly thin. Its skin looked like bark, rough and dark, and its limbs were too long for its body. But the worst part was its torso. It was covered in mouths, dozens of human mouths, all moving independently, all whistling different tunes. The sound was horrible, a chorus of stolen voices all singing at once. Jake saw it too. He screamed and ran, crashing through the underbrush like a madman. I ran after him, but the creature was faster. It moved between the trees like smoke, appearing and disappearing, always just out of sight. When I finally caught up with Jake, he was huddled behind a fallen log, shaking like a leaf. He tried to speak, but no sound came out. His mouth moved, but there was nothing. No voice, no whisper, nothing. The creature had taken his voice, but it hadn't taken his life, not yet. And that's when I realized what it was doing. It wasn't just killing people, it was collecting them. Their voices, their words, their ability to communicate. It was building a library of human sounds, and it was using them to hunt. The radio crackled again. This time, it was my daughter Lucy's voice. "Daddy," she said, and my heart nearly stopped. "Daddy, where are you? I'm scared. Daddy, please come, find me." I knew it wasn't real. I knew my daughters were safe at home with their mother, but hearing Lucy's voice, so young and frightened, made something inside me break. "I'm coming, sweetheart," I whispered. "Daddy's coming." And I started walking toward the sound. Jake grabbed my arm and pulled me back. He couldn't speak, but his eyes were wide with terror. He shook his head frantically and pointed to the radio, then made a slashing motion across his throat. He was right, it was a trap. But hearing my daughter's voice, even knowing it wasn't real, made me want to run to her. The creature was using our love against us, and it was working. The voices were getting stronger now, more insistent. Through the radio, from the trees, from the very air around us, I could hear Alina crying, "Marcus, help me. Something's wrong with the girls. They're hurt. Please come home." But I forced myself to stay put. Jake and I huddled together behind the fallen log, trying to figure out what to do. The helicopter was gone. The pilot had heard his wife's voice and followed it into the forest. We found his body an hour later, arranged like the others. 7 people dead, 7 voices added to the creature's collection. As night fell, the temperature dropped even more. Our breath came out in puffs, and frost started forming on the moss. The creature was moving more boldly now, circling us like a predator. We could see its shadow dancing between the trees, and the sound of all those mouths whistling and calling was driving us half crazy. That's when I remembered my grandfather's stories. The voice stealer, he'd called it, and he'd told me how to fight it. "Fire," I whispered to Jake. "Natural fire, not from matches or lighters, but from flint and steel. Fire that comes from the earth itself." Jake nodded and started digging through his pack. He found his emergency fire kit, old-fashioned flint and steel, just like the Rangers used to carry. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold it. The creature was getting closer. I could hear its footsteps now, soft and padding, like a cat stalking a mouse. And then I saw it clearly for the first time. It was horrible. Its body was wrong, stretched too tall and too thin. Its arms reached almost to the ground, and its fingers were like twigs, long and sharp. But its face was the worst part. Where a normal face should be, there was just smooth bark with dozens of human mouths scattered across it, all moving and whispering. "Marcus Whitehorse," it said, and its voice was a mixture of all the voices it had stolen. "Cherokee, Father, Ranger, your voice will join us." It knew my name, it knew my heritage, it knew about my family. "Your daughters," it continued, using Lucy's voice, "they miss their daddy. They want you to come home." Then it switched to Marie's voice. "Daddy, there's a monster in my room. Please help me." I wanted to scream, to run, to do something. But Jake got the fire started, and as soon as the sparks caught the dry moss, the creature recoiled. It made a sound like wind through dead leaves, angry and frustrated. I remembered something else my grandfather had told me. Cherokee death songs, sacred songs that were supposed to confuse evil spirits, make them lose their power. I'd never believed in them, but now I was desperate. I started singing. My voice was shaky and weak, but I remembered the words, the old Cherokee words my grandfather had taught me when I was a boy. The creature's voices became confused, jumbled. The stolen voices were arguing with each other, fighting for control. Jake fed the fire with more moss and twigs, and the light grew stronger. The creature backed away, but it wasn't gone. It was circling us, looking for weakness, waiting for the fire to die down. "Your wife," it said, using Elena's voice. "She's in danger. Marcus, the girls are hurt. You need to come home now." But I kept singing. The death song seemed to be working. The creature's voices were becoming more confused, more desperate. Some of the stolen voices were starting to sound different, like they were fighting against the creature's control. "Help us," one of them whispered. It sounded like James Morrison. "It's keeping us trapped. We can't get away." The creature roared, a sound like 100 voices screaming at once. It rushed at us, its long arms reaching for my throat. I grabbed a burning branch from the fire and swung it at the creature's face. It connected with one of the mouths, and the creature screamed in pain. The mouth went silent. One of the stolen voices was gone. That's when I understood. The creature wasn't just mimicking voices, it was actually holding them prisoner. Each mouth on its body contained a real human voice, trapped and suffering, and fire could set them free. I grabbed my emergency flare gun and fired it at the creature. The flare struck its torso, and 3 more mouths went silent. 3 more voices were freed. The creature was weakening. Its form was becoming less solid, more like smoke and shadow. But it was also getting more desperate. It threw itself at us again and again, trying to reach us before the fire could destroy more of its stolen voices. Jake was throwing everything he could find onto the fire. Moss, twigs, even his spare clothes. The flames were getting higher, and the creature was backing away further. But then I heard something that made my blood freeze. Real voices, calling from the forest. Human voices, but not stolen ones. Rescue teams, searching for us. "Over here," I shouted. "We're over here." But the creature smiled. All of its mouths smiled at once. It had learned something new. It started calling back to the rescue teams, using my voice, Jake's voice, the voices of the dead hikers. "Help us." It called in James Morrison's voice. "We're trapped. This way." And then, in my own voice, "Over here, I found them. They're hurt." The rescue teams were getting confused. They were splitting up, following different voices, walking into the creature's trap. I could hear them calling out to each other, asking which voice was real, which direction to go. The creature was winning. It was using our own rescue against us. I made a decision that probably saved both our lives. I took my emergency flare gun and fired it straight up into the canopy. The flare caught the moss-covered branches, and they went up like a Christmas tree. The fire spread fast, jumping from tree to tree, filling the forest with light. The creature screamed as the natural fire surrounded it. This wasn't just flame from matches or lighters. This was fire born from the earth itself, from the flint and steel, from the organic materials of the forest. It was the kind of fire my grandfather had told me about, the kind that could hurt spirits and demons. The stolen voices were being released all at once. I could hear them crying out as they were freed. James Morrison, Linda Chen, Susan Park, Rodriguez, all of them. Their voices rose up with the smoke, finally free from their prison. But the creature wasn't done. Even as the fire burned away, its stolen voices, it was getting more desperate. It charged at me through the flames, its remaining mouths screaming with rage. I pulled out my grandfather's tobacco pouch, the one he'd given me years ago, the one I'd carried but never used. Sacred tobacco, another one of his old remedies. I threw the tobacco into the fire, and the smoke changed. It became thick and white, and when it touched the creature, the thing's form became solid again, real, vulnerable. I could see its true shape now. It was ancient, older than the trees themselves. Its bark-like skin was covered in scars, marks from centuries of battles with people who had fought back. This wasn't the first time someone had tried to stop it. Jake couldn't speak, but he pointed to something in the creature's chest, a hollow space, like a cave or a burrow. Inside, I could see shapes moving, human shapes, but small and twisted. The creature wasn't just stealing voices, it was stealing souls. I grabbed another burning branch and thrust it into the hollow. The creature's scream was like nothing I'd ever heard. It was the sound of 100 deaths, 1,000 fears, all the terror and pain it had caused over the years. The shapes in its chest began to dissolve, rising up like smoke. I could see faces in the smoke, the faces of all the people it had killed over the decades. They looked at me with gratitude before disappearing into the night sky. The creature was shrinking now, its form becoming less solid, but it made one last desperate attack. It lunged at me with its remaining strength, its twig-like fingers reaching for my throat. I sang the death song again, louder this time. The words seemed to burn in my throat, like they were made of fire themselves. The creature's attack faltered, and it fell back into the flames. With a final scream that echoed through the entire forest, the creature burst into flames. Not regular flames, but white-hot fire that burned everything it touched. The ground, the trees, even the air itself seemed to catch fire. And then, suddenly, it was over. The creature was gone, leaving only a circle of burned earth where it had stood. The fire in the trees was already dying down, and the forest was quiet again. Really quiet this time. The natural quiet of a place at peace. Jake was staring at me with wide eyes. He tried to speak, but still no sound came out. The creature had taken his voice permanently, but he was alive. We were both alive. I helped him to his feet, and we started walking toward the sound of the rescue teams. Real rescue teams this time, calling our names with their real voices. We could tell the difference now. After hearing all those stolen voices, we knew what real human speech sounded like. The rescue teams found us just as the sun was coming up. They were amazed that we'd survived, confused about the fire, asking 100 questions about what had happened to our missing team members. I told them it was a bear attack, a coordinated attack by a pack of bears. Something that had never happened before. The bodies were positioned strangely because the bears were unusually intelligent, possibly rabid. Nobody believed me, but nobody had a better explanation. The area was closed indefinitely for wildlife management, and all the evidence was taken away by government officials who asked more questions than they answered. Jake and I were given psychiatric evaluations. We were both diagnosed with trauma-induced hallucinations, which was partly true. We had been traumatized, but we hadn't been hallucinating. The creature was real, the voices were real, and somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew it wasn't completely gone. Things like that, ancient things that have been hunting for centuries, don't just disappear. They wait, they heal, they find new hunting grounds. But for now, the forest was safe, the voices were silent, and Jake and I were alive to tell the tale, even if nobody would believe us. That was over 60 years ago, and I'm an old man now. Jake never got his voice back, but he learned to live with it. He became an advocate for people who can't speak, learned sign language, and helped a lot of folks over the years. He still draws pictures of the creature sometimes, detailed sketches that make my skin crawl even now. I transferred to a desk job after that. Couldn't handle the deep woods anymore. Every time I heard whistling or voices calling in the forest, I'd break out in a cold sweat. My family noticed the change in me. Alina found me practicing Cherokee songs in the garage, and the girls asked why Daddy didn't want to go camping anymore. I learned to speak Cherokee fluently after that incident. Started studying the old protection rituals, the ceremonies my grandfather had tried to teach me. I became what the Cherokee elders call a voice keeper, someone who watches for supernatural threats and knows how to fight them. The whole river valley is still closed to the public. Officially, it's for wildlife management, but I know better. The government has monitoring equipment out there, scientists studying acoustic anomalies, trying to understand what happened. They have files on it, classified files with code names like Project Vocal Mimicry. But sometimes, hikers still report hearing voices in the deep woods, perfect human voices calling their names from places where no humans should be. Search and rescue teams have learned to avoid certain areas, and there are unofficial guidelines passed down among rangers. Never follow familiar voices in the forest. Always carry tobacco and fire-starting materials. Work in groups of 4 or more. My daughters are grown now, with children of their own. I've taught them the Cherokee death songs, told them about the voice stealer, shown them how to make fire from flint and steel. They think their grandfather is getting superstitious in his old age, but they humor me. They wear the tobacco pouches I made for them, and they know the warning signs. Alina passed away 5 years ago, cancer, but sometimes, on quiet nights, I swear I can hear her voice calling my name from the forest behind our house. I know it's not her. Elena's spirit is at peace, gone to whatever comes after this life, but something else has learned to use her voice, and it's waiting for me to follow it into the trees. I won't, of course. I'm too old and too wise to fall for that trick. but I keep my grandfather's tobacco pouch close, and I remember the songs he taught me, because I know that somewhere out there, in the deep woods, where the moss hangs thick and the mist never lifts, something is still hungry. The creature I fought that October night wasn't the only one of its kind. There are others, scattered across the forests of the Pacific Northwest, in Alaska, in Northern California, in the deep wilderness areas where people rarely go. They're patient, these hunger spirits. They can wait decades between meals, centuries between hunts, but they're always listening, always learning, always adding new voices to their collection. So if you're ever in the deep woods and you hear a voice calling your name from the shadows, don't investigate, don't respond, just leave immediately. Walk away and don't look back, because some things are hungrier than you can imagine, and they're always looking for their next meal. The forest remembers everything, and some things that live in the forest remember us too. My name is Marcus Whitehorse, and this is my story. I'm telling it now because I'm old, and soon I'll be gone. But the voice stealer isn't gone. It's still out there, waiting in the deep woods, collecting voices and learning new ways to hunt. Someone needs to remember. Someone needs to watch. Someone needs to be ready to fight back when it returns. Because it will return. Things like that always do. And when it does, I hope whoever faces it will remember the old ways, the sacred songs, the fire that burns away evil. I hope they'll be stronger than I was, braver than I was, and luckier than I was. Because next time, there might not be anyone left to tell the tale. My name is Daniel Ironwood, and I need to tell you something that happened to me back in 1978. Something that changed everything I thought I knew about the world. I was a park ranger in the Boundary Waters up in Minnesota, near the Canadian border. Been doing that job for 16 years after I came back from Vietnam. The wilderness was my home. I knew every trail, every lake, every hiding spot within 100 miles. People said I was part Indian, part Swedish, but I just called myself a guy who understood the woods. My grandmother used to tell me stories when I was little, stories about the wolf walker, men who became something else, something hungry and wrong. I always figured they were just old tales, the kind every culture has to explain the things that go bump in the night. Now I know better. It was late November, and the lakes were starting to freeze over. Not solid yet, but thick enough to make you think twice about crossing. The air had that sharp bite that meant winter was coming fast and hard. I was at the ranger station, going through paperwork, when the call came in. For hunters hadn't checked in. They were supposed to radio every day, but we hadn't heard from them in 5 days. The last message we got was weird, real weird. The voice was shaky, scared. The wolves here are wrong. They're watching us. They're there planning something. I've heard scared hunters before. City guys who get spooked by normal forest sounds. But this was different. The guy who called it in was Jake Morrison, a local who'd been hunting these woods for 30 years. Jake didn't scare easy. My boss told me to take the canoe out to Devil's Lake, where they were supposed to be camping. It was a 6-hour trip, by water, maybe 8 if the wind was against me. I packed my gear, camping stuff, first aid kit, emergency radio, and my rifle. Standard procedure for a rescue mission. The morning I left, something felt off. The birds were too quiet. Usually, you'd hear them calling back and forth, especially the ravens. But it was silent, except for the sound of my paddle cutting through the water. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. I'd been paddling for about 2 hours when I started seeing the tracks. Wolf tracks along the shoreline, but they were huge, bigger than any wolf I'd ever seen. And there were so many of them, it looked like a whole pack had been walking along the water's edge. But the spacing was wrong. Too far apart. Human. That's when I started remembering my grandmother's stories. She'd sit me down by the fire and tell me about the wolf men. She said they were cursed, that they'd been human once, but got twisted by something dark and hungry. She said they remembered being human, which made them more dangerous than any regular wolf. I kept paddling, but my hands were getting sweaty on the paddle handle. The tracks kept following the shoreline, and I kept following them. Every now and then, I'd see something that made my stomach turn. A footprint that started out looking like a boot, then changed halfway through the mud into something with claws. By the time I reached Devil's Lake, the sun was getting low. I could see the hunters' camp from the water, but something was wrong. The tents were still up, but they were torn. Not cut, torn, like something with claws had ripped through them. And there was a smell in the air, thick and sour, like meat. That had been left out too long. I beached my canoe and pulled out my rifle. The silence was complete now. No insects, no birds, no small animals rustling in the brush. It was like the whole forest was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. That's when I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. It was a wolf howl, but it was wrong. Too deep, too long, and it came from the direction of the camp. But what made my hands shake was that it sounded almost like it was trying to say something, like it was trying to form words. I should have left right then, should have gotten back in my canoe and paddled straight back to headquarters. But those hunters were counting on me, and I'd never walked away from someone who needed help. I had no idea what I was about to walk into. I moved toward the camp slow and careful, rifle ready. The first thing I found was Jerry Patterson's hat, sitting on a log like someone had placed it there on purpose. It was covered in blood, but not splattered, more like it had been dipped in it. The camp was a mess. Sleeping bags torn open, food scattered everywhere, but not eaten. Just ... arranged, like someone had been playing with it. The cooler was open, and the meat inside was gone, but the cans and bread were stacked in neat little piles. I found the first body behind a fallen tree. It was Tom Hendricks, one of the hunters. At least, I think it was Tom. It was hard to tell because something had chewed on him pretty bad. But here's the thing that made me sick. The bite marks in his bones looked human. The teeth marks were too big, too sharp, but they were definitely human-shaped. I was kneeling there, trying to figure out what could have done this, when I heard footsteps. Not paws, footsteps. Someone walking upright, but trying to be quiet about it. I turned around with my rifle up, and that's when I saw him. It was Jake Morrison, the guy who'd made the last radio call. He was standing about 20 feet away, just staring at me. He looked mostly normal except for his eyes. They were yellow now, like a wolf's eyes, and his fingers were longer than they should be, with nails that looked more like claws. "Jake," I called out. "Jake, you okay?" He tilted his head to one side, like a dog trying to understand something. Then he smiled, and I saw his teeth. They were still human teeth, but the canines were longer, sharper. When he spoke, his voice was rough, like he'd been howling. "Danny," he said. "Danny Ironwood. Your grandmother told good stories." That made my skin crawl. I hadn't told anyone about my grandmother's stories. Not ever. "Jake, what happened here? Where are the others?" He laughed, and it was the worst sound I'd ever heard. It started human but ended as a howl. "The others are here. Danny, they're all here. We're all here now." That's when I noticed the smell coming from him. It was the same rotting meat smell I'd been smelling since I arrived, but stronger. And underneath it was something else. Something wild and animal. "Jake, I'm going to get you some help. Just stay calm, okay?" He laughed again. "Help? Danny, I don't need help. I need food." He lunged at me faster than anything human should move. I barely got my rifle up in time. The shot caught him in the shoulder and spun him around. But he didn't go down. He just looked at the blood for a second, then looked back at me with those yellow eyes. "That hurt," he said, and his voice was getting deeper, rougher. "But it won't stop me." I backed away, working the bolt on my rifle. "Jake, I don't want to hurt you, but you can't hurt me," he said. "Not anymore. None of you can hurt us anymore." That's when I heard the howls. Not just one, a whole pack of them, coming from all around the camp. But they weren't normal wolf howls. They were too smart, too planned, like they were talking to each other. Jake's face started changing as I watched. His jaw got longer, his nose flattened, and hair started growing on his cheeks. But the worst part was his eyes. They stayed intelligent, stayed human, even as the rest of him became something else. "Run, Danny," he said, and his voice was barely human now. "Run fast. The pack is hungry, and we remember how to hunt." I ran. I crashed through the woods, branches tearing at my clothes, my heart hammering in my chest. Behind me, I could hear them coming. Not just Jake, all of them, howling and calling to each other, coordinating their chase like they had human brains and wolf bodies. I made it to my canoe, just as the first one broke out of the trees. It wasn't Jake. It was something that might have been human once, but now it was walking on two legs that bent wrong, with arms that hung too long. It was wearing the torn remains of a hunting jacket, and it was smiling with a mouth full of teeth. I shoved off from shore and started paddling like my life depended on it, because it did. The thing on the shore howled, and others answered from the forest. As I paddled away, I could see them moving between the trees, shapes that walked, upright but moved like animals, and all of them had those same yellow eyes. I was halfway across the lake when I heard the radio crackling in my pack. Tom Peterson's voice came through, tinny and distant. "Daniel, this is base. We're sending backup. 3 Rangers, coming in by float plane. Should be there in 2 hours." I grabbed the radio. "Tom, don't come here. Tell them to stay away." But the radio was dead, and somewhere behind me, I could hear the sound of something big moving through the water. They were following me. I made it to shore on the far side of the lake, but I could hear them splashing behind me. They were swimming, something no normal wolf would do in water this cold. I dragged my canoe up the beach and started running inland, trying to put distance between me and whatever was chasing me. The forest felt wrong. Everything was too quiet, too still. The normal sounds of the woods, birds, insects, small animals, were completely gone. It was like the whole ecosystem had packed up and left, leaving just me and the things that used to be human. I found a good spot behind some rocks and waited. Through the trees, I could see them moving around the lakeshore. There were at least 6 of them now, and they were working together. Some were checking the water's edge for tracks. Others were spreading out to search the forest. They moved like a pack, but they were using human intelligence to coordinate their hunt. That's when I heard the float plane. I tried to signal them with my emergency mirror, but they were already coming in for a landing. I watched from my hiding spot as the plane touched down on the lake. Tom Peterson climbed out first, then Sarah, Chen and Mike Rodriguez, good people I'd worked with for years. I was about to call out to them when I saw the shapes moving through the trees toward the lake. The pack had heard the plane too, and they were closing in. "Tom," I shouted, "get back." In the plane, but they couldn't hear me over the sound of the engine. I watched Tom wade toward shore, his rifle ready. He was a good ranger, careful and smart, but he had no idea what he was walking into. The first one hit him from behind. It looked like it might have been Jerry Patterson, one of the missing hunters, but it was hard to tell. Its body was stretched out, arms and legs too long, and it was covered in coarse brown hair, but it was still wearing Jerry's hunting vest. Tom spun around and fired, but the thing was already on him. I heard him scream as those long fingers with their claw-like nails raked across his back. Sarah and Mike were shooting now, but their bullets didn't seem to do much damage. The creatures kept coming, shrugging off wounds that should have dropped them. I saw Sarah get pulled down by something that might have been Jake Morrison. She was still fighting, still trying to get her rifle up, when it bit her on the shoulder. The scream she made will haunt me forever. Mike made it back to the plane, but as he tried to start it, something grabbed the pontoons from underneath. The plane rocked violently, and Mike fell backward into the water. He came up thrashing, but they were already on him. I couldn't watch anymore. I ran deeper into the forest, the sounds of the attack fading behind me. But the worst part was that I could hear them calling out as they died. They were calling my name, asking for help, begging me to save them. I found an old trapper's cabin about a mile inland. It was falling apart, but the walls were solid. I barricaded myself inside and tried to think. 3 more people were dead, or worse, because of me, because I'd led them here. But as night fell, I started hearing voices outside the cabin, familiar voices. "Daniel." It was Tom's voice, but wrong somehow, deeper, rougher. "Daniel, we need help. We're hurt bad. Danny, please." That was Sarah. "Please let us in. We're cold." I looked through a crack in the logs. They were out there, all right, Tom and Sarah and Mike, standing in the moonlight, but they were different now, taller, with longer arms and faces that were starting to change, and their eyes glowed yellow in the darkness. "We know you're in there," Mike said. His voice was becoming more like a growl. "We can smell you. Just let us in," Tom said. "We're still your friends. We're still the same people." But they weren't. I could see it in the way they moved, the way they stood. They were becoming something else, something that remembered being human but wasn't anymore. I heard scratching at the walls, long claws scraping against wood. They were testing the cabin, looking for weak spots, and they had all night to find them. "Danny." Sarah's voice was getting less human by the minute. "Danny, do you remember that time we got lost in the storm? You helped us then. Help us now." The scratching got louder. I could hear them moving around the cabin, surrounding it, and then I heard something that made my blood freeze. They were laughing, not human laughter, something hungry and wild and wrong. They were enjoying this. They remembered being human enough to play with their food. That's when I realized the truth. This wasn't just some animal attack. This was something that took people and turned them into monsters, but left enough of their human minds intact to make them perfect hunters. They knew how people thought, how they acted, how they could be tricked, and they were getting smarter. I heard Tom's voice again, but now it was coming from right above me. He was on the roof. "Daniel, we just want to talk. We have so much to tell you about what we've learned, about what we've become." The roof creaked. He was moving around up there, looking for a way in, and I knew that sooner or later he was going to find one. One had to get out of there. But they were all around the cabin now, and they could see in the dark better than I could. And they knew these woods almost as well as I did. That's when I remembered my grandmother's stories. She'd told me about the Mayangunwinin, but she'd also told me how the old ones fought them. Sacred tobacco, she'd said. Smoke from the sacred tobacco could hurt them, could make them remember what they used to be. I still had my grandmother's tobacco pouch. I'd carried it for years, more out of sentiment than belief. But now it might be the only thing standing between me and becoming like them. I could hear them getting closer. The scratching was becoming digging now. They were trying to claw their way through the walls, and Tom was still up on the roof, right above my head. The roof gave way with a crash of splintered wood. Tom dropped through, but it wasn't Tom anymore. Not really. He was something stretched and twisted, covered in coarse hair, with a face that was caught between human and wolf. But he was still wearing his ranger badge. "Hello, Daniel," he said, and his voice was a growl that tried to be words. "We've been waiting for you." I had my rifle up, but I knew bullets wouldn't stop him. They hadn't stopped the others. Instead, I pulled out my grandmother's tobacco pouch and dumped some into my palm. "Stay back," I said, hoping I sounded braver than I felt. Tom laughed, showing teeth that were too long and too sharp. "Grandmother's medicine, Daniel. We're not afraid if I threw the tobacco into the cabin's old fireplace and grabbed my emergency flare." The tobacco caught fire immediately, and thick, sweet smoke filled the room. Tom's laughter turned into a scream of pain. He staggered backward, clawing at his face. "It burns," he howled. "It burns." The smoke was having an effect on the others, too. I could hear them outside, whimpering and crying out. For a moment, through the smoke, I saw Tom's face change. The wolf features faded, and he looked almost human again. "Daniel," he whispered, and his voice was his own. "Kill me, please. I can't fight it much longer." "Tom, what happened to you?" "The curse," he said, his face already starting to change back. "It spreads through bites, through blood. We're still in here, Daniel, still conscious, but we can't control it. We can't stop ourselves from hunting." His eyes were fading from yellow back to brown. "It started with the hunters. Something bit Jake in the woods. Old curse, old evil. It's been sleeping in these woods for almost 100 years, waiting for the right conditions. How do I stop it?" "You can't," he said, and his voice was getting rougher again. "You can only contain it. Keep it away from people. The smoke helps, but it won't last long." He was changing again, his face stretching, teeth growing longer. "Daniel, run. The pack is coming, and there are more of us now. We turned the pilot, and we're going to turn you too." I could hear them outside, recovering from the smoke. They were moving around the cabin again, and now they sounded angry. I grabbed my gear and kicked through the back wall, where the logs were rotted. The smoke was fading, and I could hear Tom starting to howl again. By the time I was outside, he was fully transformed. The forest was full of them now. I could see their eyes glowing in the darkness, at least 8 or 9 of them. They were spread out in a hunting formation, trying to drive me toward the lake. But I knew something they didn't. There was an old trapper's path that led north, away from the water. I ran through the darkness, branches whipping at my face, roots trying to trip me. Behind me, I could hear them calling to each other, coordinating their pursuit. They were faster than me, stronger than me, but I knew these woods better than anyone. The path led to an old beaver dam, and beyond that was a frozen creek. The ice was thin, but it might hold my weight. It wouldn't hold theirs, not if they were moving together. I made it to the creek just as the first one broke through. The trees behind me. It was Sarah, but stretched and twisted like the others. She was still wearing her ranger jacket, but it was torn and bloody. "Danny," she called out, her voice a mixture of growl and human words. "Danny, don't run. We just want to make you like us. We want you to understand." I stepped onto the ice carefully. It groaned under my weight, but it held. Sarah followed, and then Tom, and then the others. The whole pack was moving onto the ice, and I could hear it starting to crack. The ice won't hold all of us, I called out. You know that. We know, Tom said, his yellow eyes reflecting the moonlight. But we're not afraid of the water. We're not afraid of anything anymore. That's when I realized my mistake. They were hurting me, driving me onto the ice on purpose. They wanted me trapped out there, away from the shore, away from any chance of escape. The ice cracked like a gunshot. I saw Sarah go through first, disappearing into the black water. Then Mike, then two others I didn't recognize. But they didn't sink. They swam like animals, moving through the water toward the shore. Tom was still on the ice, moving toward me. Behind him, Jake Morrison was pulling himself out of the water, his wet fur steaming in the cold air. End of the line, Daniel, Tom said. Time to join the family. I had one flare left and a handful of tobacco. I threw the tobacco into the air and lit the flare. The sudden bright light and smoke made them all scream and stagger. Backward, for a moment, I saw their faces change, saw the humans they used to be fighting to get out. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm so sorry. Then the ice gave way, under all of us. The water was so cold it felt like knives cutting into my skin. I went under, came up gasping, went under again. Around me, I could hear them splashing, howling, some of them still trying to reach me, even as they fought to stay afloat. I made it to shore somehow, pulled myself out of the water onto the muddy bank. Behind me, I could hear them getting out, too, but they were moving slower now, weighed down by their wet fur and the cold. Tom was the first to reach the shore. He was barely recognizable now, more wolf than man, but as he stood there, dripping and shivering, something in his eyes changed. The yellow faded to brown, and he looked at me with an expression I'll never forget. Daniel, he said, and his voice was completely human. Get out of here now, before we recover. Tom, go, he shouted, and his voice was already changing back. The curse is strong, but the cold slows us down. You have maybe an hour before we can track you properly. I ran through the forest, following trails I'd known since childhood, putting as much distance as possible between myself and the lake. Behind me, I could hear them starting to howl again, but the sound was getting fainter. I didn't stop running until I reached the ranger station 3 hours later. That was 45 years ago, and I'm still here. Still in these woods, still watching, still waiting. The official report said it was a coordinated wolf attack. Rabies, they claimed. The area was quarantined, and it still is. Maps show it as a wildlife preserve, but the real reason is to keep people away from what's still out there. Because they're still out there. I never left the wilderness after that night. Couldn't. The bite I got from Sarah when she grabbed my arm as I was pulling her from the water, it changed me. Not completely, not like the others, but enough. I age slower now, heal faster. On nights when the moon is full, I can feel the wolf stirring inside me, but the tobacco keeps it quiet. I've become something between human and monster. A guardian. I guess the Ojibwe elders say I'm the wolf guardian, tasked with keeping the curse contained. They taught me more about the old ways, about the sacred tobacco, and the rituals that can hold back the darkness. The pack is still out there, led by Tom Peterson. I've seen him over the years, watching from the tree line. He's not the man he used to be, but sometimes, just sometimes, I can see recognition in those yellow eyes, a reminder of who he used to be. They've grown in number. Hikers who don't heed the warnings, researchers who think they know better, government agents who'd tried to capture specimens for study. They all join the pack in the end. I estimate there are at least 15 of them now, maybe more. Every winter, when the lakes freeze over and the hunger gets strong, I have to be ready. The tobacco helps, but it's not a cure. It's just a way to hold them back, to keep them from spreading into the towns and cities where they could infect hundreds. I've tried to warn people, written reports, talked to other rangers, even tried to get the story out to the media. But who's going to believe a story about wolfmen in the Minnesota wilderness? Most people think I'm just an old ranger who's been alone in the woods too long. But some people listen. Other rangers, mostly. They know to carry tobacco when they work up here. They know to avoid the quarantine zone. They know that if they see wolves walking upright, they should run. The government knows too. They've sent teams to try to capture the pack, to study them, to see if they can weaponize the curse. All those teams end up joining the pack or disappearing entirely. Eventually, they stopped trying. I keep a journal now, documenting everything I see, everything I learn. Someday, when I'm gone, someone else will need to take over. Someone else will need to guard the boundary between the human world and the world of the wolfmen. Because make no mistake, this isn't the only place where the old curses still run wild. I've heard stories from Alaska, from northern Canada, from the deep forests of Maine. The world is bigger and stranger than most people want to believe, and there are things in the dark places that remember when humans were prey. Last week, I found fresh tracks near the southern boundary of the quarantine zone. The pack is getting restless, testing their limits. Winter's coming early this year, and they're going to be hungry. I'm getting old, even with the curse slowing. My aging, my hands shake sometimes, and I can't move as fast as I used to. But I'm still here, still watching, still keeping the barrier between them and the outside world. If you're reading this, if you're working in the northern wilderness, remember what I've told you. If you see wolves walking upright, don't investigate. Don't try to be a hero. Just leave. Get as far away as you can and don't look back. The pack is always hunting for new members, and they remember everything they learned as humans. They know how to set traps, how to hunt, how to turn people like them into perfect predators, and they're patient. They have all the time in the world. My name is Daniel Ironwood, and I'm the last thing standing between the pack and the world beyond these woods. When I'm gone, God help whoever has to take my place. The wolves are howling tonight, and they sound hungry. They always sound hungry. My name is Thomas Redhawk, and I need to tell you something that happened to me in 1991. Something that changed everything I thought I knew about the world. I was a park ranger at Yellowstone for 18 years, had a PhD in wildlife biology, published papers on predator behavior, worked with universities all over the country. I thought I knew everything about bears, wolves, mountain lions. I was wrong. My wife died 3 years before this story. Cancer took her fast. My kids were grown up and living their own lives. The wilderness was all I had left, and I loved it. Every morning I'd wake up in my cabin and feel grateful I got to spend my days in the most beautiful place on earth. October 1991 was cold that year. Snow came early to the high country. I was working in the Lamar Valley, way back in the back, 8 hours from the nearest road. We were doing research on wolf behavior for the reintroduction program. Wolves were coming back to Yellowstone after being gone for almost 70 years. I grew up hearing stories from my grandfather about the old days. He was Lakota Sioux, told me tales about spirits that lived in the mountains. Shadow bears, he called them, Mato Yamni, in our language, said they were guardians that protected sacred places from people who didn't respect the land. I never believed those stories. I was a scientist. I believed in facts, evidence, things I could measure and study. Spirits were just old superstitions, tales told around campfires to scare kids. That October, I was leading a team of 6 other researchers. We had Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a wildlife biologist from Colorado, Dr. James Peterson, who studied wolfpack behavior, 4 other researchers, all smart people with degrees and years of experience. The area we were studying was beautiful but strange. The Lamar Valley stretched out like a golden carpet, surrounded by dark pine forests and steep rocky cliffs. It was the kind of place that made you feel small, like you were just visiting something much bigger and older than yourself. But something felt wrong from the first day. The animals were acting weird. Deer were bunched up in tight groups, nervous and jumpy. Elk were staying out in the open meadows, afraid to go into the trees. Even the birds seemed quieter than usual. Never seen anything like it, Dr. Mitchell said on our second day. She was watching a herd of elk through binoculars. They're acting like there's a huge predator around, but we haven't seen any sign of bears or mountain lions. I thought maybe it was just the weather. Early snow can make animals nervous, but deep down, something was bothering me. The silence in the forest was too complete. Even the insects seemed to have disappeared. We set up camp in a meadow near a small creek. Good water, open ground, easy to defend if we needed to. I had no idea what we might need to defend against. That night, I woke up to the sound of something moving around our camp. Not walking, but moving like something huge was out there in the dark, just beyond our fire's light. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside my tent. Nothing, just empty forest and the sound of wind in the trees. But I could feel eyes watching me. The hair on my arms stood up, and I got that feeling you get when you're being hunted. I walked around the camp, checking for tracks. Nothing. No footprints, no scat, no broken branches, but the feeling of being watched never went away. Probably just elk, I told myself, but I knew it wasn't elk. I'd been in the wilderness for 18 years. I knew the difference between natural sounds and something else. The next morning, Dr. Peterson found something strange. He called us all over to look at marks on a tree about 50 yards from our camp. They looked like claw marks, but they were wrong. Too big, too high up, spaced too wide apart. What kind of bear makes marks like that? Dr. Mitchell asked. I measured them with my tape measure. The marks were 12 feet off the ground. The spacing between claw marks was 18 inches. I'd never seen anything like it. Maybe a really big grizzly, standing on its hind legs, I said. But even as I said it, I knew it was wrong. The biggest grizzly in Yellowstone wouldn't be able to reach that high, and no bear had claws spaced that far apart. That's when I first started to wonder if my grandfather's stories might be more than just tales told around campfires. The third day is when everything started to go wrong. We were using thermal imaging cameras to track animal movement patterns. The cameras could see heat signatures through the forest, even in complete darkness. They were expensive, high-tech equipment that the Park Service had just bought. Dr. Mitchell was monitoring the cameras when she called me over. "Thomas, you need to see this." On the screen, I could see a massive heat signature moving through the trees. It was huge, maybe 900 pounds, and it was moving in a straight line toward our camp. "What is it?" I asked. "I don't know. It's too big to be a grizzly, and it's moving wrong. Look at the gait pattern." The thing on the screen was walking on two legs, not foot. It was tall, maybe 12 feet, and it moved like it knew exactly where it was going. "Where is it now?" I asked. Dr. Mitchell pointed to a spot about 100 yards away, right there, behind those trees. I looked where she was pointing. There was nothing there, just empty forest. "The camera must be malfunctioning," I said, but Dr. Mitchell shook her head. "No, look, the heat signature is still there. It's just standing there, watching us." I grabbed my binoculars and looked at the spot where the camera showed the heat signature. Nothing, but the feeling of being watched was so strong it made my stomach hurt. "This doesn't make sense," I said. "If something that big is standing right there, we should be able to see it." Dr. Mitchell was staring at the screen. "Thomas, it's moving again, coming straight toward us." I watched the heat signature move closer, 50 yards, 30 yards, 20 yards. But when I looked up from the screen, I still couldn't see anything. "Everyone, back to camp now," I said. We packed up our equipment and headed back to the tents. But the feeling of being stalked followed us. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see something huge and dangerous. But there was never anything there. That night, Dr. Peterson volunteered to take the first watch. He was a good man, careful and experienced. He'd been in the wilderness for 15 years, knew how to handle himself around dangerous animals. I woke up at 3 in the morning to the sound of screaming. Dr. Peterson was thrashing around in his sleeping bag, making awful noises. I unzipped my tent and ran over to him. He was alive, but barely. His chest was torn open, like something with huge claws had ripped through his jacket and into his flesh. But his jacket wasn't torn. The zippers were still closed. The fabric was perfect, but underneath, his chest was shredded. "What happened?" I asked him. He looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. Something, ... something invisible. It was right there. I could feel it breathing on me. Claws went right through my clothes, right through everything. Dr. Mitchell was trying to stop the bleeding, but the wounds were too deep. "We need to get him to a hospital," she said. But Dr. Peterson grabbed my arm. "Don't let it get the others," he whispered. "It's not natural. It's not from our world." He died 20 minutes later, still holding on to my arm. We radioed for emergency evacuation, but the radio wasn't working right. Static filled the airwaves, and when we did get through, our GPS coordinates kept changing. The rescue team couldn't find us. Dr. Mitchell and I examined Dr. Peterson's body. The wounds were impossible. Claw marks that went through his flesh, but not his clothes. Like something had reached through the fabric and into his body. "This can't be real," Dr. Mitchell said. "Things like this don't happen." But I was starting to remember my grandfather's stories. Shadow bears that could move between worlds. Invisible guardians that protected sacred places. The next morning, one of the other researchers, Dr. Martinez, found tracks around our camp, but they weren't normal tracks. They were massive, like a bear's paw prints. but they only appeared in certain places. A print in the mud by the creek, another one 20 feet away on solid rock, another one in the middle of our camp. It's like whatever made these can appear and disappear, Dr. Martinez said. That's when I knew we were dealing with something my grandfather would have recognized, something that wasn't entirely in our world. I tried to call the tribal council to talk to the elders who might know about these things, but the radio still wasn't working right. Every time I tried to make a call, I heard strange sounds in the static, growling, but not like any animal I'd ever heard. Dr. Mitchell was setting up the thermal cameras again when she went completely pale. "Thomas, come here, right now." On the screen, I could see the same massive heat signature as before, but this time it was standing right in the middle of our camp, right next to Dr. Martinez, who was looking at tracks in the dirt. "Martinez," I called out, "move away from where you are now." He looked up at me, confused. "Why? What's wrong? Just move. Trust me." He started to walk toward us. On the thermal screen, I watched the heat signature follow him. It was stalking him, staying just a few feet behind him. "It's right behind you," I said. "Keep walking. Don't look back." Dr. Martinez started to run. The heat signature ran after him, but we couldn't see anything with our eyes, just Dr. Martinez running across the meadow, being chased by something invisible. He made it to our group, breathing hard. "What's going on?" he asked. "Something's hunting us," I said. "Something we can't see." That's when I heard a sound that made my blood turn cold. A growl, deep and rumbling, coming from something much bigger than any bear. And it was coming from right next to us. The growl was so deep I could feel it in my chest. Dr. Martinez went white as a sheet and started shaking. Dr. Mitchell was staring at the thermal camera screen, her hands trembling. "It's right here," she whispered, "right next to us." I looked at the screen. The heat signature was massive, standing maybe 8 feet away, but when I looked up, there was nothing there, just empty air. "Everyone stay calm," I said. "Move slowly back to the tents." We started backing away, but the heat signature moved. With us, it was following us, staying just outside our group. I could hear breathing, heavy and rough, like something huge was panting. Dr. Rodriguez, one of our younger researchers, panicked. He turned and ran toward the trees. The heat signature on the screen moved faster than anything I'd ever seen. In seconds, it was on him. We heard Dr. Rodriguez scream. Then silence. We found him an hour later, hanging upside down from a tree branch 20 feet off the ground. His body was twisted and broken, but there were no rope marks, no signs of how he'd gotten up there. It was like something had just put him there. "This isn't possible," Dr. Mitchell said. "Things like this don't exist." But I was starting to understand. My grandfather had been right. There were things in the world that science couldn't explain. Guardians that protected sacred places from people who didn't belong. That night, I tried to remember everything my grandfather had told me about shadow bears. They were spirits, he'd said, guardians of the old places. They could move between the spirit world and our world, becoming solid when they needed to fight. "We need to leave," Dr. Mitchell said. "We need to get out of here right now." But when we tried to hike out, we got lost. Trails that should have led back to the road went in circles. GPS readings made no sense. It was like the forest itself was keeping us here. The thermal cameras showed the creature following us everywhere. We went. Sometimes it would disappear for hours, then suddenly appear right next to us. It was playing with us, like a cat plays with mice. On the fourth night, Dr. Mitchell volunteered to keep watch, while the rest of us tried to sleep. She was tough, a former Marine who'd served in the Gulf War. If anyone could handle whatever was out there, it was her. I woke up to the sound of her rifle firing. 3 shots, fast and precise, then screaming. I ran outside and found her standing by the dying campfire, her rifle empty, staring at something I couldn't see. "I hit it," she said. "I know I hit it. 3 shots, sent a mass, but it just kept coming." There was no blood on the ground, no sign that anything had been shot, but Dr. Mitchell was shaking so hard she could barely hold her rifle. "It's real," she said. "It's real and it's hunting us." The next morning, we found Dr. Williams dead in his tent. His sleeping bag was zipped up. The tent was closed, but inside he was torn apart, like something had materialized inside the tent, killed him, then disappeared. That left just me, Dr. Mitchell, and Dr. Martinez, 3 people out of a team of 7. "We're going to die here," Dr. Martinez said. Whatever this thing is, it's going to kill us all. I was starting to think he was right. But then I remembered something else my grandfather had told me about a tribal elder who had fought a shadow bear in 1876. He'd used traditional methods, things the white soldiers didn't understand. I need to contact my people, I said. The tribal council, they might know how to deal with this. Dr. Mitchell looked at me like I was crazy. You want to call for help from people who believe in ghost stories. Those ghost stories might be the only thing that can save us. I managed to get through to the tribal council on the radio. The connection was full of static, but I could hear my cousin Robert on the other end. Thomas, you need to get out of there, he said. That area is sacred. The elders have been worried about what might happen with all the wolf research going on. What do you mean? The shadow bear, Marto Yamni, it guards the old hunting grounds. Your research team has disturbed something that should have been left alone. How do I stop it? You can't stop it. You can only appease it. But you'd need an elder, someone who knows the old ways. And Thomas, ... The price for disturbing a shadow bear is high. The radio went dead. But an hour later, I heard a helicopter. Help was coming. The helicopter landed in our meadow, and out stepped Joseph Crowfeather, an elder from the tribal council. He was 70 years old, walked with a cane, and looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. You boys have stepped in something deep, he said. That shadow bear has been sleeping for over 100 years. Your wolf research woke it up. Can you help us? I asked. Joseph looked around the meadow, his eyes seeing things I couldn't. Maybe, but it's going to cost these old spirits. They don't give up easy. He started preparing for some kind of ceremony. He pulled out a pouch of red clay and began drawing symbols on the ground. He lit a bundle of sage and tobacco, muttering prayers in Lakota. You three need to stay inside this circle, he said. Whatever happens, don't leave the circle. As the sun went down, the thermal cameras started going crazy. The heat signature was back, but now it was huge, bigger than before, and it was angry. Joseph stood outside the circle, facing something we couldn't see. Marto Yamni, he said in a strong voice. These people meant no harm. They were just trying to help the wolves come home. A growl filled the air, so loud it shook the ground. Dr. Mitchell grabbed my arm. It's right there, she whispered, right in front of him. Joseph held up his hands. I offer myself in their place. Take me, and let them go. No, I said, you can't do that. But Joseph smiled. This is what elders are for, Thomas, to protect the young ones. The growling got louder. I could feel hot breath on my face, smell something wild and ancient. Then Joseph screamed. When it was over, Joseph lay on the ground, still breathing but unconscious. The red clay circle around us was broken, and the feeling of being watched was gone. Is it over? Dr. Mitchell asked. I looked at the thermal camera. The screen was empty. Whatever had been hunting us was gone. But Joseph never woke up. He died in the helicopter on the way to the hospital, a peaceful smile on his face. Joseph Crowfeather was dead, but his sacrifice had given us something. The shadow bear was gone, but I could feel it wasn't far away. It was waiting, watching from somewhere between worlds. The helicopter pilot rushed us to the hospital in Cody, Wyoming. Dr. Mitchell and Dr. Martinez were treated for shock and exposure. I stayed with Joseph's body, performing the prayers my grandfather had taught me. At the hospital, I called the tribal council to report Joseph's death. That's when I learned the truth about what we'd been dealing with. Joseph knew this might happen. Robert told me. The shadow bear has been guarding that valley for over a century. In 1876, when Custer's men came through, it killed the whole cavalry patrol. 20 soldiers, torn apart by something invisible. Why didn't anyone warn us? We tried. The tribal council sent letters to the Park Service, asking them to avoid that area, but nobody listened. You white folks always think you know better than the old stories. I felt sick. 7 people had died because we'd ignored warnings we didn't understand. Is it gone now? I asked. No. Joseph's sacrifice bought you time, but it didn't destroy the creature. It's still bound to that valley, still protecting it. It will always be there. When I got back to Yellowstone, the Park Service was already covering up what had happened. The official report said our research team had been attacked by a grizzly bear. The area was closed to all future research. But I knew the truth, and I knew I couldn't let anyone else make the same mistake we had. I started studying everything I could find about shadow bears and other guardian spirits. I learned that they existed in sacred places all over the American West, mountains, valleys, forests that were protected by invisible watchers. The thermal cameras had captured something impossible. Heat signatures of creatures that cast no shadows, left no tracks, but were as real as anything in our world. I kept the recordings, even though the Park Service ordered me to destroy them. 3 months later, I was leading a different research team in a different part of Yellowstone when the thermal cameras picked up another massive heat signature. This one was smaller than the shadow bear, but it was following us just like before. "Pack up," I told the team. "We're leaving now." "But we just got here," Dr. Stevens protested. "We haven't even started our research." "Trust me," I said. "This area is protected. We need to go." I'd learned to read the signs. When the animals disappeared, when the forest went silent, when the thermal cameras showed things that shouldn't exist, it was time to leave. That night, I performed the ceremony Joseph had taught me. I drew symbols in red clay, burned sage and tobacco, and spoke the old prayers. The heat signature on the thermal camera watched me for a while, then disappeared. "What was that about?" Dr. Stevens asked. "Respect," I said. "Some places require respect." Over the next few years, I developed what other rangers started calling the Red Hawk protocols. When working in areas with a history of unexplained incidents, carry red, clay and tobacco. Monitor for electromagnetic interference. Watch for animal behavior changes. And always respect the old warnings. I started working with tribal elders from different nations. They all had stories about guardian spirits, invisible protectors, shadow creatures that defended sacred places. The shadow bear was just one of many. In 1995, I was called to investigate a series of disappearances in Glacier National Park. Hikers were vanishing in an area. The Blackfeet called the place where spirits walk. The thermal cameras showed the same impossible heat signatures I'd seen in Yellowstone. This time, I knew what to do. I contacted the tribal council before anyone else died. We performed the proper ceremonies, made the proper offerings, and asked permission to work in the area. The guardian spirit in Glacier was different from the shadow bear. Smaller, more curious than aggressive. It watched us work, but it didn't attack. It even seemed to help, guiding lost hikers back to marked trails. "You're learning," said Mary to Eagles, the Blackfeet elder who helped me. "The spirits aren't evil. They're just doing their job, protecting what's sacred." "How many of these guardians are there?" "Everywhere," she said. "Every mountain, every forest, every place that's been sacred for thousands of years. Your people just forgot how to see them." By 1999, I'd documented guardian spirits in a dozen different locations. Each one was different, but they all shared certain characteristics. They existed between worlds, becoming solid only when they needed to interact with our reality. They were bound to specific territories, protecting them from those who would do harm. The shadow bear in Yellowstone remained the most dangerous. It had killed too many people, been awakened too violently. Other guardians were gentler, more willing to coexist with humans who showed proper respect. But the shadow bear never forgot, never forgave. It was still there, still watching, still protecting that valley from anyone who didn't understand the old ways. In 2001, a team of cryptozoologists tried to film the shadow bear. They ignored all warnings, refused to follow the protocols I'd developed. They wanted to capture evidence of the impossible creature for a television documentary. They found them 3 days later, all 5 team members, killed in ways that made no sense. The cameras they'd brought were destroyed, but the footage was intact. Hours of empty forest, while the audio recorded sounds of something massive moving through the trees. The shadow bear had become more than a guardian. It was a teacher, showing anyone who would listen that some things in the world are bigger than human understanding. That was 30 years ago. I'm retired now, living in a small cabin outside of Yellowstone, but my work isn't done. Every month, I go back to that valley where it all started. I perform the ceremonies Joseph taught me, make offerings to the shadow bear, and check the balance between our world and the spirit world. The shadow bear is still there. I can feel it watching me when I visit, but there's understanding between us now. It knows I respect the old ways, that I try to protect what's sacred. My children think I've gone native, lost my scientific mind to superstition, but they don't understand. Science and spirit aren't opposites. They're different ways of seeing the same truth. The wolf reintroduction program was successful. Wolves are thriving in Yellowstone now. But they avoid that valley where the shadow bear hunts. They know better than to disturb something that's been protecting that land for centuries. I've trained other rangers in the protocols I developed. How to recognize when you're in a protected area. How to show respect to guardians. You can't see how to work with nature instead of against it. Some people think I'm crazy. That's fine. They can think what they want. But the rangers who work the backcountry know the truth. They carry red clay and tobacco. They watch for electromagnetic interference. They respect the old warnings. The government still tries to study these phenomena. Military researchers want to understand invisible warfare applications. They send teams into protected areas, trying to capture or control the guardians. Those teams never come back. The shadow bear and its kind aren't weapons. They're not monsters. They're part of something much older and more important than human politics. They're the memory of the land itself, protecting what's sacred from those who would destroy it. My grandson visits me sometimes. He's studying to be a park ranger like his grandfather. I teach him the old ways, the ceremonies, the respect required to work in sacred places. Are they real, Grandpa? He asks me. The shadow bears. I show him the thermal camera footage I've kept hidden for 30 years. Heat signatures of creatures that don't exist, moving through forests that know their ancient names. They're as real as anything else in this world, I tell him. More real than most things. They're the guardians of everything we've forgotten how to protect. The shadow bear is still out there, still watching that valley. It will always be there, protecting that sacred place from those who don't understand. It's patient, eternal, and absolutely unforgiving of those who disturb the balance. If you're ever working in the backcountry and you feel like something invisible is watching you, listen to that feeling. Show respect. Make offerings. Remember that you're a guest in places that were sacred long before humans ever set foot there. Some places are protected by guardians that hunt from between worlds. They're not evil. They're just doing what they've always done, protecting what's sacred from those who would destroy it. The shadow bear taught me that some things in this world are bigger than human understanding. Science can measure heat signatures and electromagnetic interference, but it can't measure the weight of centuries-old promises, the power of sacred bonds, the strength of guardians who stand between worlds. I'm an old man now, but I still go back to that valley every month. I still perform the ceremonies, still make the offerings, still maintain the balance between our world and theirs. The shadow bear is waiting for me there. It always will be. And when my time comes, when I join Joseph Crowfeather in the spirit world, I know there will be others to take my place. The guardians are patient. They have all the time in the world and they're still watching. My name is Rebecca Hawthorne, and I've been a park ranger in the Great Smoky Mountains for 14 years. I've seen my share of things that would make most people sleep with the lights on. But in the spring of 1984, I found something that still haunts my dreams. People think being a ranger is all about giving directions and checking camping permits. They don't know about the real work, the 3 a.m. calls when hikers don't come back, the desperate searches through freezing rain, the families who look at you with hope that slowly dies in their eyes. I've pulled bodies from rivers, found hunters who got lost and froze to death, and carried out kids who fell off cliffs. In 200 successful rescues, I learned to read the signs. I know when someone's scared, hurt, or lying. That's why what happened with the Morrison family still makes my hands shake. I grew up in these mountains. My daddy was a ranger, and his daddy before him. My grandmother used to tell stories about the old days, about Cherokee spirits that lived in the deep hollows. Face stealers, she called them. Things that took your appearance and wore it like a coat. I never believed those stories. I was too practical, too modern, too stupid. My son Derek was 16 then, all arms and legs and attitude. After his father left when Derek was 8, it was just the two of us. Derek knew these mountains almost as well as I did. He could track a deer through snow and find water in a drought, but he also knew when to stay home and when to worry about his mom. That morning started normal. Spring was coming late that year, and patches of snow still hid in the shadows between the trees. The dogwoods were just starting to bloom, little white flowers like scattered tissues against the dark bark. I was at the ranger station, filling out paperwork and drinking coffee that tasted like it was made from pine needles. The call came in around 10. A family camping near Cades Cove hadn't checked in when they were supposed to. Tom and Linda, their kids Jenny, Sam, and baby Michael. They'd been camping for 3 days and should have been back yesterday. Tom Morrison was the careful type, the kind who checks his watch every hour and never misses a deadline. I grabbed my gear and headed out. The drive to their campsite took me through some of the prettiest country in Tennessee. Rolling hills covered in oak and hickory, little streams that sang as they ran over smooth stones. But something felt wrong. The woods were too quiet. No birds singing, no squirrels chattering. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. I found their camp easily enough. All their gear was their tent, camp stove, coolers full of food, but no family. I called out their names and got nothing back but my own voice echoing off the trees. That's when I saw her. A little girl, maybe 8 years old, with brown hair in pigtails and a pink jacket. She was sitting on a log near the fire pit, just staring at the cold ashes. When I called to her, she looked up with the biggest, bluest eyes I'd ever seen. "Are you Jenny Morrison?" I asked. She nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Jenny. Where's your family, sweetheart?" "They're still sleeping." She pointed toward the tent. Daddy said not to wake them up, but I'd already looked in the tent. It was empty. I knelt down next to Jenny, trying to keep my voice gentle. "Honey, there's nobody in the tent. When did you last see your mom and dad?" Her face scrunched up like she was thinking hard. "This morning." "No, yesterday. They were making breakfast." She looked at me with those perfect blue eyes. "I think they went to get firewood." Something cold crawled up my spine. The story kept changing, but Jenny didn't seem worried or scared. She was too calm, too perfect. Real kids who lose their parents don't sit quietly by a dead fire. They cry. They panic. They look for help. "Jenny, can you show me where they went?" She stood up and brushed off her jeans. "Sure, they're right over there." She led me about 50 yards from the camp, to a small clearing surrounded by tall oaks. And there they were, Tom and Linda Morrison, sitting on a fallen log, holding hands and smiling at me. "Thank goodness you found us," Linda said. "We were just about to head back to camp, but something was wrong." Their smiles were too wide, too perfect. Their eyes didn't blink often enough. And when Tom stood up to shake my hand, his movements were just slightly off, like he was thinking about each step before he took it. "We were worried about you," I said. "Your checkout time was yesterday." "Oh, was it?" Tom tilted his head. "We lost track of time. You know how it is when you're having fun." His voice was right, the same deep tone I'd heard when he registered at the station. But the words felt wrong, like someone reading from a script. And there was something else. The way he said having fun sounded like he wasn't quite sure what fun was supposed to feel like. "Where are Sam and the baby?" I asked. "Back at camp," Linda said, "taking a nap." But I'd searched the whole campsite. There was no sign of the two boys. I looked at Jenny again. She was standing perfectly still, watching me with those two blue eyes. In the 14 years I'd been a ranger, I'd never seen a kid stand that still. Children fidget. They pick at things. They move around. Jenny looked like a statue of a little girl. "Why don't we all head back to camp?" I suggested. "I need to check on the boys." As we walked back, I kept glancing at the family. They moved wrong, too coordinated, like they were all following the same set of instructions. Their footsteps fell in rhythm. When one of them turned their head, the others did too, just a second later. But the worst part was their faces. When they weren't talking to me, when they thought I wasn't looking, their expressions went completely blank. Not sad or thoughtful or bored, just empty, like someone had turned off a light behind their eyes. Back at camp, I radioed my supervisor. "This is Rebecca. I found the Morrison family. They're fine, but I need backup out here." The radio crackled. "Copy that. Rebecca, what's your situation?" I looked at the family. They were all watching me with those perfect, empty smiles. "I'm not sure yet. Just send someone and tell them to bring a camera." Mike Sutton arrived about an hour later. Mike was a good ranger, steady and smart. He'd been working the mountains for almost as long as I had, and we'd partnered on dozens of rescues. If anyone would understand what I was seeing, it would be Mike. He walked into the campsite with his usual easy smile, but it faded when he saw the family. I watched his face change as he took in their too perfect stillness, their synchronized movements. "Afternoon, folks," he said carefully. "I'm Ranger Sutton. Just checking to make sure everyone's okay." "We're fine," all four of them said at the same time. Mike's hand moved instinctively toward his radio. He'd caught it to the wrongness that hung around them like a bad smell. "Mike, Could you help me check the perimeter? I asked. Make sure we didn't miss anything. We walked about 20 yards from the camp, far enough that the family couldn't hear us clearly. Rebecca, what the hell is going on? Mike whispered. Those people are... He struggled for words. They're not right. I know. I found a little girl alone, and her story keeps changing. The parents showed up out of nowhere, and they're all acting like robots. Where are the boys? Sam and the baby? I shook my head. I don't know. They claim the kids are napping, but I've searched everywhere. Mike pulled out his camera. Let me get some pictures. Maybe headquarters can make sense of this. He walked back toward the family, raising his camera, but as soon as he pointed it at them, the strangest thing happened. The camera wouldn't focus. The lens kept adjusting, back and forth, like it couldn't decide what it was looking at. When Mike checked the display, the photos were all blurred, like the subjects were moving, even though they stood perfectly still. Cameras busted, he muttered, but I could tell he didn't believe it. That's when I noticed the silence. The woods around us were dead quiet. No insects buzzing, no birds calling, no small animals rustling through the underbrush. Even the wind had stopped. It was like the whole forest was holding its breath. Jenny, I called to the little girl. Come over here for a minute. She walked over with that same perfect posture, her feet barely making a sound on the forest floor. When she got close, I knelt down and pulled out my compact mirror. Look at yourself, sweetheart. Make sure you don't have any dirt on your face. Jenny looked in the mirror, and for just a second, her reflection wavered. The face in the mirror was slightly different. The eyes were too dark, the smile too wide. Then it snapped back to normal, but Jenny saw it too. She jerked back from the mirror, and for the first time her expression changed. Fear flickered across her face, real, genuine fear. I don't want to look anymore, she whispered. Jenny, where's your real family? I asked gently. She looked at me with those two blue eyes, and I saw something moving behind them, something that wasn't human. They're sleeping, she said. They're sleeping in the deep place. A chill ran down my spine. What deep place? But Jenny was already walking back to the others, her perfect posture restored. As she rejoined the group, they all turned to look at Mike and me with identical expressions of patient waiting. We should go, Mike said quietly. Something's really wrong here. That's when I heard it, a sound like crying, coming from somewhere underground. It was faint, almost like the wind, but it sounded like a child calling for help. Did you hear that? I asked. Mike nodded. Sounds like it's coming. From over there, he pointed toward a rocky outcrop, about 100 yards away. We told the family we'd be right back and followed the sound. It led us to a narrow opening in the rocks, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. The crying was louder here, echoing up from somewhere deep underground. It's a cave system, Mike said. Probably connects to the main caverns. I pulled out my flashlight and shined it down the opening. The beam disappeared into darkness, but I could hear the crying more clearly now. It was definitely a child, and it sounded like they were in pain. We need to go down there, I said. Rebecca, this feels like a trap. Maybe, but if there's a kid down there, ... Mike sighed. Okay, but we go in armed, and we stay together. We squeezed through the opening and found ourselves in a narrow tunnel that sloped downward. The walls were smooth limestone, carved by thousands of years of water flow. Our flashlights threw dancing shadows that made the tunnel seem alive. The crying got louder as we descended. Soon we could hear other sounds too, weak voices calling for help, the sound of someone moving around in the darkness. The tunnel opened into a large cavern, and our flashlights revealed the horror waiting for us. Bodies, 5 of them, arranged in a circle in the center of the cavern. A man, a woman, 2 boys, and a baby. The Morrison family. The real Morrison family. But they weren't dead. They were moving, trying to speak, reaching weakly toward our lights. And their faces were gone. Removed so cleanly it looked like surgery, leaving behind smooth, blank skin. Jesus Christ, Mike breathed. That's when I saw the walls. Carved into the limestone were hundreds of faces, each one perfectly preserved. Men, women, children, all watching us with empty eye sockets, and below each face was a name and a date, going back decades. The crying was coming from the Morrison family. They were alive, somehow alive, even without their faces. The baby was in his mother's arms, both of them making soft, muffled sounds of distress. We have to get them out of here, I said. But as we moved toward the bodies, we heard something behind us. Footsteps in the tunnel, the sound of people climbing down. Rebecca, Mike, are you down there? It was Jenny's voice. But how had she known where we were? We're coming to help, called Tom Morrison's voice. But the real Tom Morrison was right in front of us, faceless and dying. Mike grabbed my arm. We need to go now. But it was too late. The fake family appeared at the tunnel entrance, their perfect faces smiling in the darkness. And behind them, something else was moving. Something tall and grey that didn't quite fit in the tunnel. Found you, Jenny said, and her voice was wrong, too deep, too old for a child. The thing behind them stepped into the light, and I finally saw what we were really dealing with. It was roughly human-shaped, but too tall, too thin. Its skin was grey and smooth, like wet stone, and where its face should have been, there was nothing but blank skin. But its torso was covered in faces, dozens of them, embedded in the grey flesh like medals on a uniform, all of them moving slightly, blinking, trying to speak. You see, the thing said, and its voice came from all the faces at once. I collect them. Each one teaches me something new about being human. The fake family stepped aside, and I realized they were just extensions of the creature, puppets made of stolen faces and borrowed memories. I've been watching you, Rebecca Hawthorne, it continued. You have such an interesting face, so much pain behind those eyes, so much guilt about your husband leaving, about raising your son alone. My blood went cold. How could it know about that? And your son Derek, it said, wearing Jenny's face but speaking in its terrible chorus voice. Such a beautiful boy, 16 years old, brown hair, green eyes. I've been watching him too. Stay away from my son, I snarled. The creature laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Oh, but I already have his face. Would you like to see what? One of the faces on its torso shifted, and suddenly I was looking at Derek's face, embedded in the monster's chest. His eyes were moving, looking at me with desperate recognition. Mum, the face whispered. Help me. I screamed and lunged forward, but Mike caught my arm. That's not Derek, he said urgently. It's a trick. But the face looked so real, so much like my son that my heart was breaking. Derek, baby, hold on. Mama's coming. Mom, it hurts, the face whispered. It hurts so much. Stop it, I shouted at the creature. He's just a boy. He tastes like guilt, the creature said, like loneliness, like fear of not being good enough. Such complex emotions, much more interesting than simple terror. The fake Morrison family started moving toward us, their perfect faces never changing expression. But now I could see the truth behind their eyes. They were empty shells, just masks the creature wore. The tunnel, Mike said. We need to get to the tunnel. But as we turned, more figures appeared. Rangers I recognized, Bob Chen, Sarah Williams, Tim Rodriguez, all of them wearing the same perfect, empty expressions. Hello, Rebecca, Bob said. We're here to help. But Bob had been dead for 3 years, killed in a climbing accident on Mount LeComte. This is impossible, Mike breathed. Not impossible, the creature said, just efficient. I keep the faces that serve me best. Bob was such a good ranger, so trustworthy, people always believed him. The fake Bob stepped forward. Come with us, Rebecca. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I pulled out my sidearm, but my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it. Stay back. Bullets won't help, the creature said. You can't kill something that's already dead. That's when I remembered my grandmother's stories, the Cherokee legends about face stealers and how to fight them. She'd made me wear a sacred stone necklace when I was little, claimed it would protect me from evil spirits. I'd stopped wearing it when I got older, but I still had it. I reached under my shirt and pulled out the small leather pouch I'd carried since childhood. Inside was a piece of black stone, carved with symbols I'd never understood. The moment I touched it, the creature recoiled. All of its stolen faces twisted in pain, and it let out a sound like nails on a chalkboard. What is that? It hissed. Cherokee protection stone, I said, remembering my grandmother's words. Blessed by the medicine man, it shows the truth. I held the stone up, and immediately the cave changed. The fake family wavered like heat mirages, their perfect faces becoming grey and featureless. The creature's true form became clearer, not human at all, but something ancient and hungry. Mike, do you have anything Cherokee on you? Anything blessed or sacred? He shook his head. Nothing. Rebecca, what is that thing? None. You knew W-I said, the Cherokee word feeling strange on my tongue. stone dress. My grandmother called them face stealers. They steal human faces to understand emotions. The creature was backing away from the stone, its stolen faces writhing in distress. Put it away, it demanded. It burns. Good, I said. Then let these people go. I can't, it said. They're part of me now. Their faces, their memories, their feelings. I am them, and they are me. That's when I understood the true horror of what we were facing. This wasn't just a killer, it was a parasite that consumed identity itself. Every person it took became part of its collection, their faces and memories used to hunt new victims. But I can offer you a trade, the creature said. Your son's face for yours. I'll let Derek go if you take his place. Derek's not here, Mike said. It's lying. But the creature smiled with all its faces at once, isn't he? It gestured to the tunnel entrance, and Derek stepped into the light. My son, my beautiful boy, looking exactly like himself, except for his eyes. They were too dark, too empty. Mom, he said in his own voice, I came looking for you when you didn't come home. This nice ranger said you were in trouble. I knew it wasn't really Derek. I knew it was just another mask the creature wore. But seeing his face, hearing his voice, made my heart break all over again. Let him go, I begged. Please, he's just a child. He's 16, the creature said. Old enough to understand fear, but young enough to taste innocent. A perfect addition to my collection. The fake Derek stepped forward, and I could see the wrongness in his movements. Too fluid, too controlled. Real Derek moved like a teenager, all sharp angles and nervous energy. This thing moved like an old man pretending to be young. I'm scared, Mom, fake Derek said. Can we go home now? I wanted to run to him, to hold him, to protect him, but I knew that the moment I touched him, the creature would have me. Instead, I held the sacred stone higher. Show me his real face, I demanded. The creature laughed. You don't want to see that. Show me. The stone pulsed with warm light, and fake Derek's face began to change. The features melted and shifted, revealing the gray, featureless skin underneath. But for just a moment, I saw something else, a glimpse of real terror in eyes that weren't Derek's. Whose face is that? I whispered. A boy from Virginia, the creature said casually, about Derek's age. He was camping with his family last month. They're all part of my collection now. Rage flooded through me. This thing had been hunting children, stealing their faces, using them to lure in more victims. And now it was threatening my son. Where is Derek? I demanded. The real Derek. Safe, the creature said. For now. But he won't stay that way if you don't cooperate. That's when Mike made his move. While the creature was focused on me, he grabbed one of the emergency flares from his pack and lit it. The bright red light filled the cavern, and the creature shrieked in pain. The faces, Mike shouted. The light hurts. The faces. He was right. The stolen faces on the creature's torso were writhing and screaming, trying to hide from the flare's light. The fake people in the tunnel were backing away, their perfect masks beginning to slip. Run, I shouted. We sprinted toward the tunnel, pushing past the fake Morrison family. Behind us, the creature was howling in rage and pain, its stolen faces screaming in unison. The sound was like nothing I'd ever heard, pure anguish mixed with inhuman fury. We squeezed through the tunnel opening and emerged into daylight. The fake campsite was empty now. All the creature's puppets recalled to deal with the threat below. We need to get help, Mike said. Call in the cavalry. But when he tried to use his radio, all we got was static. Then, impossibly, we heard our own voices coming through the speaker. This is Rebecca Hawthorne, the radio said in my voice. False alarm on the Morrison family. Everything's fine out here. Cancel that backup, Mike's voice added. We're heading back to headquarters. Someone was using our voices, sending false information to keep other rangers away. We were completely on our own. It's learning, I said. It's getting smarter. A sound made us both freeze. Footsteps coming up from the cave. Slow, deliberate, purposeful. Rebecca, called my own voice from the darkness. Why are you running? From yourself. I turned around and saw myself climbing out of the cave. It was perfect. My face, my hair, my uniform, even the scar on my chin from when I fell off my bike as a kid. But the eyes were wrong. They were too knowing, too old. You look surprised. The fake me said, don't you recognize yourself? Mike raised his flare, but the creature wearing my face just smiled. Light won't help you now. I've learned to tolerate it. What do you want? I asked. To understand, it said. Humans are so complex, so many emotions, so many contradictions, fear and love, hope and despair, all mixed together in fascinating ways. The fake me stepped closer. You, for instance, you're terrified, but you're also angry. You love your son, but you feel guilty about not being a good enough mother. You want to save everyone, but you know you can't. Every word was true, and hearing them in my own voice made them cut deeper. I've been studying you, Rebecca, watching you work, seeing how you interact with people. You're so genuine, so caring. People trust you immediately, and you want to use that. I want to be that, it said, to understand what it feels like to care about someone else. More figures emerged from the cave. The fake Morrison family, the dead rangers, and dozens of others I didn't recognize. All of them wearing perfect faces, all of them moving in that same too-controlled way. You see my collection, the creature said, gesturing to the crowd. Each face teaches me something new, but yours will be special. You have so much experience with pain, with loss, with responsibility. I'll learn so much from wearing your face. You're insane, Mike said. I'm evolving, the creature corrected, learning to be more human, and Derek will help me practice. That's when I saw him. The real Derek, held between two of the creature's puppets. He was unconscious but alive, his face pale and his breathing shallow. Derek. I started toward him, but the fake me blocked my path. Careful, it warned. One wrong move, and I'll take his face right now. Please, I begged. He's just a boy. He doesn't know anything about this. He knows about guilt, the creature said. About feeling responsible for his father leaving. About worrying that he's not good enough. Such rich emotions for someone so young. It was reading Derek's memories, understanding his deepest fears, using them against both of us. I'll make you a deal, I said. Take my face, but let Derek and Mike go. Mom, no, Derek mumbled, barely conscious. Rebecca, don't do this, Mike said. But I was already moving, pulling out the sacred stone. If I give you this, if I let you take my face, will you promise to leave them alone? The creature considered this. The stone burns me, but if you're willing to give it up, I need your word, your promise. It smiled with my face. I promise to let them live, but I can't promise they'll stay sane after seeing what I really am. That's when I understood what I had to do. My grandmother's stories hadn't just been about protection, they'd been about sacrifice. The Cherokee warriors who gave their lives to save their people from the face stealers. I accept, I said. I threw the sacred stone to Mike. When I tell you to run, you run. Get Derek out of here, and don't look back. Rebecca, no, do it, I shouted. The creature stepped toward me, its stolen faces beginning to merge and shift. I could see its true form underneath, something ancient and hungry, older than the mountains themselves. Your face will be perfect, it said. So much character, so much experience. It reached out with hands that weren't quite human, fingers too long and sharp. I closed my eyes and waited for the pain. But instead of touching me, the creature suddenly screamed. I opened my eyes to see it writhing in agony, its stolen faces peeling away like old paint. Mike was holding the sacred stone high, and it was glowing with bright white light. The stone doesn't just protect, he shouted, it purifies. The creature's faces were turning on it, breaking free from its control. They were speaking, all at once, in voices filled with pain and rage. You stole our lives. You wore our faces. You used our memories. The stolen faces were rebelling, and the creature couldn't control them anymore. It was falling apart, its carefully constructed identity masks crumbling. Run, I shouted. Mike grabbed Derek and half carried him toward the tree line. I followed, still holding the sacred stone. Behind us, the creature was shrieking as decades of stolen faces turned against it. We didn't stop running until we reached the road. Derek was fully conscious now, looking around in confusion. Mom, what happened? Where are we? It's okay, baby, I said, holding him tight. We're safe now. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. The creature was wounded, not destroyed, and it had learned too much about us to just let us go. We made it back to headquarters as the sun was setting. Derek was quiet during the drive, staring out the window like he was trying to remember something. Just out of reach. Mom, he said finally, I had the strangest dream. There was this thing that looked like people, but wasn't people, and it wanted to wear my face. I met his eyes in the rearview mirror. Just a dream, honey, just a bad dream. But I knew it had been more than that. The creature had touched his mind, sampled his memories. Even if we'd escaped, we'd never be completely free. That was 40 years ago, and I still check mirrors twice. I still look for the little tells that show when someone isn't quite right. The blink rate, the way they hold their shoulders, the micro expressions that don't match their words. Mike Sutton died 3 days after we escaped from the cave. Official cause was a heart attack, but I knew better. He'd seen too much, understood too much. The creature couldn't let him live with that knowledge. Derek grew up normal, or as normal as you can when your mother teaches you to recognize face stealers. He's got kids of his own now, and I've taught them the signs too. The Cherokee protection stones, the purification rituals, the ways to tell real from fake, because the creature is still out there. Every few years, there are reports. Families found dead in the mountains, their faces surgically removed. Missing persons who turn up days later, claiming they were never lost. People who seem right but feel wrong, who know things they shouldn't know. I became something of an expert on identity theft, not the credit card kind, but the supernatural kind. The Cherokee elders accepted me as a facekeeper, someone who guards against the ancient threats. I've consulted on cases across the southeast, always looking for the same signs, the too perfect behavior, the synchronized movements, the faces that don't quite match their reflections. I retired from the Park Service 5 years ago, but I still get calls. Rangers who've seen things that don't make sense. Families with stories that don't add up. Children who are too well behaved. My house is full of mirrors now. Every room, every hallway, every corner. Not because I'm vain, but because mirrors show the truth. They reveal the slight distortions, the small inconsistencies that betray something wearing a stolen face. Derek thinks I'm paranoid. Maybe I am, but I've seen what happens when you trust too easily, when you believe that perfect is possible. Last month, a young ranger from North Carolina called me. She'd found a family camping in the Nantahala forest. They were too perfect, she said, too coordinated. Their stories didn't match, and they knew things they shouldn't know. I talked her through the signs, taught her about the Cherokee protection stones. She found the real family 3 days later, in a cave system that hadn't been mapped. Their faces were gone, but they were alive. The creature is learning, adapting, spreading. It's not just one entity anymore. It's become something bigger, more complex. A network of face stealers working together, sharing knowledge and victims. But we're learning to... The Cherokee elders are teaching the old ways again. Rangers across the southeast are sharing information. We're building a network of our own. People who know the signs and aren't afraid to act on them. Because here's the thing about monsters. They rely on disbelief. They count on people dismissing the impossible, explaining away the obvious. They use our rational minds against us. But some of us remember the old stories. Some of us know that perfect isn't normal. That flawless is a warning sign. If you're ever in the mountains and you meet someone who seems too good to be true, remember this. Real people have flaws. Real people are inconsistent. Real people make mistakes. Perfect people might be wearing someone else's face. And if you see that perfect stranger looking back at you from a mirror, with a face that's just slightly wrong, ... run. Because the mimic is still out there, still collecting faces, still learning to be human. And it's gotten very, very good at what it does. My name is Rebecca Hawthorne, and I'm telling you this story because someone needs to know. Someone needs to remember. The face stealers are real, and they're still hunting.